Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Q&A with Whitey for 2022. Welcome back, and hey, today is St. Patrick's Day, so I went out and had a look for a really good St. Paddy's t-shirt. Couldn't find one, so I've gone for the old trusty Guinness shirt that I bought my last trip overseas when I actually was in Dublin in Ireland and went to the Guinness factory. So legit, bought from the factory itself by me. And of course, as usual, we're going to make sure you got your morning tea ready. But today, you better have that Guinness ready. It's St. Paddy's Day. So what you should be drinking, mother's milk, even though it's the Australian version. And of course, have something to nibble on. So what's the nuts? Beer and nuts, what could be better? It's close enough. Anyhow, we'll move on. Anyhow, thanks everybody for joining us. We really appreciate you being with us, and hope you're doing well. For those of you in Queensland, New South Wales have been suffering with the floods. Our hearts go out to you. We know how hard it's been. I know myself, we got flooded in where I am. Fortunately, not into the house, but understand the pain and heartache it causes. So trust everybody's doing okay and through that. And for those of you that joined us last week, we had the FBAA National Conference. It was on. We promised we'd do it face to face. We had 800 people registered to attend. Most of the people were able to make it, although a big accident in Brisbane on the motorway and floods in New South Wales held a few people back. But it was a fantastic time. And if you joined us, I hope you enjoyed it and had a thoroughly good time. The speakers during the day were first rate. And we certainly had some fun at night. A good time had by all. And if you didn't make it, November this year is the next one. So put that in your date. We're back at Seawall. We better move on, otherwise time's going to get in front of me, and Mariah, who sits behind the scenes there, is going to get angry with me. So we better not let that happen. So a special thank you to our sponsors who enable us to bring all of our educational content to you free of charge. So we have ALI, Bluestone, Finstro, Prosper, Heartland, and Insurance Advisor Net, On Deck, FunTap, Credit Fix Solutions, Affordable Staff, Lend, Pepper Money, Stripe Financial, FBAA, Ampin, and Trail Book Loans. And of course, special shout out to Suncorp, who is our wellness sponsor. They're the ones who enable us to have a confidential counselling program, the CCP, available to you with 4 free counselling sessions. Why are they free? Suncorp picks up the tab. So Suncorp, love you for that, and assured of the professional counsellors that will look after you. We get no data. Right? The only data that comes out of the back of this is a little tally that goes to Suncorp, said X amount of people used the service, pay the bill. And Suncorp too, God love them. Anyhow, if you're not feeling okay, it's all right not to feel okay, but make sure you reach out for help. The confidential counselling program's there for you. The number 1-800-808-374. Ring it. It's there for you to help you, members of your staff, and your family as FBAA members. All right. So let's do it. Make sure you reach out and look at and reach out for help. It's very, very important. Don't suffer on your own. You don't have to. All righty. Let us move on with today's conversation. And it's with great pleasure I'd like to welcome Philip Robison, who's the founder of Saving Brothers. So Philip, do you want to join us with camera and microphone, and let's start that conversation. How are you, brother?
Oh, brother, I'm awesome. And I'm going to ask you straight up, Pete, how's your day going out of 10?
My day out of 10 is actually probably sitting at a 7.5 to 8 somewhere. Still suffering a bit of stress of the floods, but I've got to say, feeling a damn sight better than what I was a couple of weeks ago. How about you? How's your day running?
I reckon I'm running at about a solid 8, and it's a great question, don't you think, straight off the bat to ask brothers around the world. We'll cover that off today.
It certainly is. Yeah, we will cover that off. And whilst we're chatting, I'm going to keep making sure that I sip on this Guinness a little bit, because that'll make my day even better, I reckon. So cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers to you, brother.
So let's get this conversation. What I want to do to start with, Phil, is before we jump into all the other conversations about keeping Five alive and Saving Brothers and what we do in the regional market, I want to understand a little bit more about you as a person. So tell me, my friend, what did you do after you left school, and what was that journey like, both personally and career-wise, to where you landed out now, without talking about what you do now? So what's your past like? Tell us about that.
No, thanks, Pete. Well, I would say I was a uni dropout. I was pretty good at going from course to course. I started at Monash University. Dad thought it was a pretty good idea to start economics. It wasn't really my passion, but like a lot of young fellas, really had no idea what I wanted to do. listen to Dad's friends, and they said, oh, the boy did well in HSC, you should send him off to do economics. And I dropped out of that pretty quick smart, ended up at La Trobe University studying psychology, and yeah, it was a pretty challenging time as probably a confused 18, 19-year-old, because at the time I really had no inkling of what was important to me. But I ended up on the stock exchange in Melbourne working on the trading floor in the late 80s. Did think I was a little bit like Gordon Gekko, and greed is good, money is good. And eventually I left that industry after the crash of 87. I was on the trading floor the day, October 20, 1987. And boy, I certainly saw some interesting expressions on people's faces that day, Pete. But I ended up in sales, and eventually I landed in the world of mortgage broking. And in fact, I was a mortgage broker myself for some 19 years, of which part of that, Pete, I was also a mortgage manager. And that was great in the heady days of certainly no doc loans and one-day ABNs, and life was a lot easier. You'd fax in a deal and you'd be able to talk to the credit manager. You'd get answers pretty quick, smart. But the world of compliance, I held a credit license as well. But I think after the 2008, 2009 GFC, I really started to have some challenges in my life. I bought a house, a large house in Melbourne. I had kids in private school, Pete, and I was really trying to keep up. Maybe I was feeling embarrassed because I never finished a degree, but I was trying to, my way of sales and my ability to communicate with people seemed to serve me well. And I built a nice business, writing $5 million a month in mortgages, and as a mortgage manager, when you could make 2% upfront, they were pretty good days. But of course, GFC came along, harpooned my business, and effectively I couldn't get a deal set because they were all mortgage insured, or what we call securitized lending, Pete, and ended up having to go back to being a broker at 0.6% upfront. So when you've been earning 2% and your lifestyle's geared to that and your debt level is geared to that, you end up fairly stressed. And I had a lot of fixed overhead. I had staff running an office in Melbourne, and plus kids in private school, had all the nice cars on hire purchase, negative equity. And fast forwarding to 2014, Pete, after a routine check, going to see my doctor, I ended up being diagnosed with prostate cancer at age 47. So I went through a few challenges with that, and subsequently I've had 5 surgeries for plumbing issues that can affect men as a result of having that sort of surgery. And ultimately I ended up leaving a marriage of 22.5 years, fairly lost I was, and ultimately ended up landing in the area of becoming a buyer's agent, but also starting and forming Saving Brothers. So that's a little bit about my journey, Pete. I mean, it was certainly a lonely time. I was no stranger to feeling lost. I think like a lot of guys in our 40s, we kind of think, is this all there is? What's the meaning of my life? So yeah, it was an interesting time, and certainly has helped form what I am now.
All right. I'm interested to talk about the buyer's agent side and obviously keeping brothers alive. And look, I better just do just 2 things very quickly. Again, happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Enjoy the day, have some fun, have a Guinness over lunch or 2. And most people are not used to me being in this environment. Normally I'm at home sitting on the couch. Well, the FBAA's moved into new offices, and I'm just noticing that backdrop looks like it's fake. It's actually not. That's the view out my office window. The clouds aren't moving, but I can assure you that that's the real backdrop. We'll tidy that up as we go forward. So this is our first Q&A with Whitey in the new office. We're still trying to get everything to work right, but yeah, that's actually the real background. That's where we are now in our new offices that we actually moved into. Well, we had set up ready to go before Christmas, but COVID, we couldn't get in till probably 3 weeks ago now, so not that long. So we're still sorting everything out. So in case you're wondering what's going on, this is the new office space, and we've got the lounge and everything ready to go. So yeah, back to subject. So mate, let's talk about buyer's agent. So that's a properties buyer's agent you run, or you have, is that right? And what, just to give me an understanding, what does that do? How does that help people?
No, that's a great question, Pete. So I specialise in buying houses across regional Australia. So my clients pay me a flat fee of $8,500 to work for them, and I source the property across Australia. So I've got a lot of contacts. I've got a lot of people that go and inspect houses for me, and I do 3 things. I buy affordable property, typically in the 300s, rental returns 5.5 to 6.5% in key cities or regional centres that are forecast or are already experiencing some nice capital growth. So we tick all three boxes at once.
So, yeah. So is that, I was about to say, why regional markets? I mean, I know property agents in more metro and city style marketplaces, but regional, that's where you specialise, or that's where your main focus is when it comes to that sort of work. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's pretty, well, the reason I got into that is after a divorce, I had some money, but I didn't have a lot in my self-managed super fund, Pete.
Yeah.
And I spoke to another broker, a friend of mine, who...
Lucky you to have money after divorce, because I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't have heaps though, mate. But I spoke to Gary Harvey, and Gary's known as the property guy. He's a broker, doesn't sell property, but he gave me some advice, and we'd known each other when I was a broker with one of the aggregators, Vow. And he said, Phil, look, I've been buying these properties for some 20 odd years. It works. I approached Terry Ryder that writes hotspotting.com.au, and look, really I found out that there was nobody specialising in the area of regional. So I've been buying them for me personally, and I thought that just makes sense. So yeah, I became a regional property buyer's specialist.
Cool. Well, we've got a whole heap of questions that have been sent in for Q&A with Whitey today. So, and some of those touch on that. So I'm going to intersperse our conversation. Sorry, they're on a screen over there. And as I said, I'm still trying to get our setup right here. So it's sort of over there rather than here, but we'll sort that out. Yeah, I'll come back to that because there's some questions here in regards to regional markets that you may be able to assist in bringing some light to the answer to those questions. But we'll come back to that because I'm interested, because the reality is I've just bought a block of land in a regional part, kind of, I guess it is classified as regional Queensland, and you know, my wife and I have been sitting on money in the bank getting 0 interest rate, and got sick of that. And I've been up here now for 12 years in Queensland, and I've been wondering where I would settle. So I hadn't bought anything after moving up here, because I really didn't know where I wanted to be, if I could put it that way, where I was going to settle down. So when I looked around now, and it's probably my own stupidity, I've left it so long, I probably should have done it ages ago. Yeah, you got money in the bank, earns no interest, so that didn't take me far. At least I guess I didn't have to pay tax on it. But yeah, we looked around, and all of a sudden I went, crap, the price of property's gone through the roof. So looking at, specifically looking at Brisbane Metro, the sort of area I was living, but also broader, a bit down the Gold Coast, a bit up Sunshine Coast, a little bit west. And I looked at the price just of vacant land, and I was shocked that what the prices have been, let alone the property prices, and COVID and all that has pushed prices through the roof. I so looked and said, yeah, I can't justify buying an existing property at that sort of level. So we opted to buy a block of land, and we're going to build on it. But yeah, and they're going, even that, they're sort of going, wow, that's a powerful lot of money for a block of land. I know I bought my first block of land and built a house for a quarter of what I just paid for a block of land. Just how they go. And I don't know, it was a while ago, so a few grey hairs here. You sort of go, that cost a lot in my head, but it is what it is. But I think, and we've spoken to other property agents, property buyers agents who are in metro markets before, and so we do have a bit of understanding. But I guess this is where that value proposition comes in. It's a bit like people going to a mortgage broker. Anyone can walk in the bank and get a loan, but you go to a mortgage broker because you go for that professionalism, that specialized skill set to guide you through something you don't do every day. And to me, that's the same underlying principle as someone such as yourself. That be fair?
I think that's very fair, Pete. Anybody, if I think of it in terms of property, can be a keyboard warrior, as I call them. In other words, you can jump on realestate.com.au or Domain, particularly for Sydney and Melbourne people who've got a lot of equity in their homes since this huge jump in property values. And so they can ride into towns and look at those properties and say, my gosh, that's mid 300s. Are you serious? That is so cheap.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is if they're all doing it, and there's a very limited supply of properties out there, and before you know it, they've bid the price up amongst themselves between $30,000 to $50,000. So they're paying overs. So I absolutely think it's just like having a mortgage broker. You've got to know where to find the deal and how to make the deal work. I always said when I was a broker, Pete, being a good mortgage broker is like an art and a science. How you present the deal to credit is critical. Anybody can save you money on an interest rate, but it's the structure of the loan, it's the presentation to credit, so that they ultimately have to say yes. So for me, because my business is called theholygrail.com.au, I'm looking for hidden gems. I buy a lot of my properties for my clients across Australia off market. So that's really important, because that can save a client tens of thousands of dollars really quickly, because we're not bidding up against everybody else.
So why do you call it? Is that part of that? Is this why you call it the Holy Grail? I've heard you refer to this 3 keys. It sounds like there's more to this, and I guess that gives the depth as to why you call it the Holy Grail. Explain just a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. And look, I like to have a bit of fun with these things, Pete. Business should be fun.
So do I, mate. So do I.
Absolutely. You're making me think, geez, a pint of Guinness wouldn't be a bad thing of all days today. So I coined that phrase. I had breakfast with Terry Ryder down in Melbourne at the Windsor Hotel probably about 18 months ago to 2 years. And we were talking about regional, and I was going to interview him, and he was already working with me as my professional mentor and writing all the reports that I buy.
Yep.
And I said, Terry, am I on the right path with this regional stuff? And he said, Phil, these properties that you're buying, he said, you're spot on. They are affordable. They've got great rental returns, and they're going up in value. And I said, Terry, it's like the Holy Grail. It's like, so I really always have said to my clients, I'm on a quest to achieve all 3 things at the same time. It's kind of like going to the casino. You know, you press the button and ding, 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 and all three lines of strawberries come up. That's how I look at it. And I'm in search of those properties that stack up.
I thought, mate, I thought you were talking about Monty Python for a minute.
Well, it's only a flesh wound, Pete. You know that. So yeah, we're showing our age there. But to me, the Holy Grail is in pursuit of what the Holy Grail could be is different for different people. I had a conversation with a lady referred to me this morning. Her husband's actually a builder. They're interested in me finding properties that they could subdivide and he could add value, manufacture equity. Other clients just want a house that is going to give them a good return. They don't have to think about it. It's cash flow positive. It's stress-free. The Holy Grail means different things to different people, but it's got to fundamentally tick all 3 of those boxes.
Yeah. Cool. Very good. Very good. So one of the questions that came in, and you're probably far better placed. I've got my personal views, but one of the questions came in and said, how will the floods in New South Wales and Queensland affect property boom, given the lack of tradies and materials to rebuild these homes? Now, I know this isn't investment, but just talking about how I guess the natural disasters that Queensland and New South Wales have experienced, and other places have experienced in the past as well with bushfires. Does that, in your mind, with your expertise or what you've seen in the past, have an impact on property prices? And again, I guess specifically if there becomes a problem in trying to get tradespeople to actually get in and get things done. And if it does have an impact, is it a positive or a negative impact on prices? You got any feel for that?
Well, I'm not buying in those markets, firstly, I will say. And again, because I'm very conscious of flooding. And so we really look at areas that aren't prone to flooding. So firstly, it's not something I've given a lot of thought to, again, because my mind's not looking for properties in those areas. But fundamentally, we do have a major issue across Australia. We've seen it with ProBuild, and there's a big development firm on the Gold Coast that have now also gone into liquidation. So I think, yes, raw materials, getting trades to these areas is a major problem. And that certainly I would have thought it would logically be a bump in the road for property values in those areas. Certainly investors that are going to go away, they're not going to want to go to some of those areas that have been really hit, not just this time, but also 2011. So I think it's probably going to have an impact that's positive, certainly not in the short term. People have got good memories about these things. And Australia is a big country, Pete, and there's a lot of other places that investors could be buying that are not prone to flooding. So no, I don't think it's going to have a positive effect. certainly in the short term.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some short-term challenges. One of the things that worries me is that a lot of the areas that are flooded aren't traditional flooding areas.
True.
Right? So, or they're, it's the fact that road infrastructure, so the gutters and the drainage systems just couldn't cope with the deluge, or there are rivers and creeks that don't normally flood, but they do due to other circumstances. And then you may find that in a certain, because as we know, lenders and mortgage insurers and insurers look at postcode geography when they're looking at risk profiling, and you may find that there is 2 streets in a postcode that flooded really bad, but 98% of that postcode area is perfectly fine, yet they turn around and penalise that postcode area. And I'm not saying that's happening. I've heard of some commentary where I feel that potentially might be happening. But I dare say, my view is that would be a very, very bad outcome. You can't just turn around and make a gross generalisation on something that's specific because of, but not representative of the greater area. And I think there's a little bit of concern with some of that, with insurers and how they might view claims or risks, but also valuations of properties and lenders all of a sudden getting hesitant, because for those of everyone that's watching around the country, and we've got quite a few hundred people watching us right now, which is great. Thank you so much for everyone joining us. But lenders have the legal right to pull out of a settlement right up to and the moment before settlement. It's written into all mortgage contracts. They can do that. They'd be absolute a-holes if they did, but it's a protective measure for lenders in one respect, that if something happens. But I sincerely hope lenders and insurers don't use something that is very abnormal to turn around and create a gross generalisation that isn't appropriate and penalise people because of it, because that would be very, very wrong. Because I know with that land I mentioned we bought, areas around it did flood, and a road down from the land flooded as well for about 10 minutes, and then it was open again. But that whole area is perfectly fine. A couple of suburbs away, not so fine. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and we just hope everybody plays a cool head with this and doesn't, and lenders and insurance do not inappropriately or unfairly penalise people because of that. Because it's going to take time for everything to get back to normal. The tradies issues, as per the question that was asked, obviously they're on their feet. I mean, we're on the river at Brisbane. There's a couple of levels of tiering, so the house is up here, the pool's down here. The pool disappeared, so did the pool fence. If our pool fence that normally blocks you from going down to the river became a shark net, because Brisbane River's full of bull sharks. But as the water subsided, I think I fished out 8 fish that got stuck in our pool and didn't make it because it was just all a bit toxic now after what happened. But to get that fixed, it's about a 4-week process. So it's got to have proper engineering certificates done. There's a certain process to do it so you don't destroy the pool pump, even though that went completely underwater. But that, which has nothing to do with the house. So we're very, very fortunate from that point of view. But that's a 4-week wait. So doesn't resolve itself quickly. And talking about regional markets, do you have any intel? The question I've got here is, do you have any information, if possible, on the expected state of the market for regional northwest Tasmania, not Hobart or Launceston? That's very specific, and good luck if you have any specific data on it, but I don't know the Tasmanian market well at all, except that it, from a property price, is one of the cheapest out of our great country. But you got any thoughts on that as to what's happening in Tasmania, and particularly up in the north or northwest?
Well, firstly, thanks for the question, Pete. We're not doing any buying for us.
The easy ones, brother.
That's okay, brother. We're good for it. We're not at the Holy Grail. We're not buying anything at all in Tassie. And again, for us, it's purely about opportunity cost. So we're looking at markets that we think could be better performing. My conversations with Terry Ryder of hotspotting.com.au, whose research that I do a lot with, and in fact, he's a guest on my property show. We did a podcast just yesterday. We have talked about Tassie in the past, and we just feel that it's at a higher point in the investment clock. And our concerns were just in terms of the breadth of employment and the opportunities moving forward. We just felt that there really just are better places for us in terms of our fundamentals. So it's kind of not really answering your question, but I don't have data. I mean, I can get reports on Tassie, but it's just for us, it's just not a market that we feel we want to play in. We love Tassie, but we just don't think that it's a good buying opportunity. There's other places that are earlier in the cycle, and there's other places that have got greater breadth of employment, industry, fed and state government spending. Yeah, so for us, I'm sorry I can't help your listener with what's happening in Northwest Tassie, really, because it's not a market that we're wanting to play in.
Yeah, and look, mate, fair call. It's a very specific geographic style of question, and you know, I, from your point of view, you are looking at it from investment opportunity for ROI. What markets are in a opportunistic circumstance that you can optimize the return from? And principally, that's your field, isn't it? And so that's why you look at certain regional markets and go, well, that's a good deal with a great return and a great upside.
Right. And like right now, Pete, anybody can go and jump on the internet or go and buy a property, and pretty much you'd be pretty confident that you're going to get capital growth. But we're really much more about beyond this FOMO at the moment, beyond this current cycle, what is going to drive and sustain regional markets in different towns? That's more important to what we're looking at. So we're not trying to make a fortune in the next 12 months. We really, one of the things we advocate is not following the herd, and unfortunately, and it's a episode Terry and I spoke about, particularly during the middle of COVID, was that the herd mentality. Most people are following the herd, and the herd is going the wrong way. So we advocate that be very careful with your research. Mainstream media is not research. Listen to the economists, who amazingly, I cannot understand why the media constantly serve up Bill Evans, Shane Oliver from AMP Bank. No disrespect to the gentleman, but why would you go to an economist to ask about what property prices are likely to do? It'd be like going to a plumber and saying, mate, can you put a PowerPoint over in that corner for me, please? They're not the right people. Yet for some reason in Australia, we have a love affair with going to economists. If you go back and look at what happened, say, beginning of COVID, March, April 20, I think it was 2020 rather, and what were the forecasts? Some were wild, saying up to 30%, but 20% was the average that these people were advocating that the market was actually going to fall. So now if you're relying on that information to make your investment decisions, I think you'd be rather disappointed. So again, I think you just got to be really careful who you listen to. And mainstream media, my point is not research.
And look, I just want to touch on that piece you mentioned about herd mentality. Now, not last night, the night before, I went to a presentation done in Brisbane by Shift, which used to be called Get Capital, and they had a speaker. They turned out some specific called Gus Valbonton. He's a guy from overseas. He was with Lonely Planet and took them to great successes. Although he's got a very heavy accent, he was a really inspiring speaker. And the principle of herd mentality said, don't be concrete, right? Block of concrete set in stone, it just goes that way. Yet everybody else might be going off that way. But your block of concrete and you're just stuck going like this. And guess what? Everybody's going, you need to be innovative. You need to be understanding where markets are going. And don't be the block of concrete. Don't do the herd mentality stuff. You got to be able to look in front of yourself. And I dare say with what we do here at FBAA, I do pride myself in being able to see. I generally say I walk 10 steps in front of myself and understand where the markets are moving from our segment. But it just rang so true what Gus was talking about, that don't be a block of concrete. Don't get stuck in herd mentality. Look at the market, read where the market's going and go after the market. And maybe in a very different direction to what you think it is right now today. And that's certainly not a bad thing. And so I hear you on that. So on all that, tell me, where are the hidden gems? Where's the places we need to be looking at?
Yeah,
give us the good oil.
And just yesterday, actually, the podcast will be available. In fact, it might even be available later today. But Terry and I spoke about some of these hidden gems, and we're talking about cities that are perhaps not in the mainstream media or not in the press. I mean, I've bought a lot of property in Albury and places like Shepparton, and certainly my favourite would probably be Toowoomba, second largest inland city in Australia, behind Canberra. Lot to like about it. But in terms of some of the up and comers, we did a podcast, as I said yesterday. So we looked at cities like Murray Bridge, 80 k's southeast of Adelaide. There's a lot to like about Murray Bridge. And we also spoke about Port Lincoln, also in South Australia. And heaven forbid, we actually spoke about Gladstone. And those who've been around the property market long enough would remember that Gladstone was the darling before it had the big collapse of, say, 2013, when property prices went into free fall. But there was a number of reasons for that, including developer oversupply and not understanding that the LNG workers who were building all these humongous projects were not going to settle and stay there. They were living in effectively these camps. So it was a complete miscalculation. But you look at Gladdy, for example. I mean, Gladstone's had turnover of some 68% increase in sales activity in the last 12 months. And again, we're looking for these clues, or what we call hidden gems. Falling vacancy rates, rising rents are a couple of the clues. And you only have to go back to Sydney in 2013 as well. It had been flat, Pete, for quite a few years, but all of a sudden vacancy rates were falling, rents were rising, and look what happened. A boom came along. Another city about an hour south of Gladdy is Billawheeler again. So there's just a couple. There's four there. I'm not saying you jump in and go off and do it. It's always about research. But for us, they're earlier in this current cycle, because I'm hearing people say, "Oh, interest rates are going up." You watch what happens to property prices. Bollocks. You look historically in Australia, just because interest rates have gone up does not all of a sudden indicate the property prices will fall. I mean, really, if I can just knock that one on the head, particularly if brokers are talking to their clients and saying, "Oh, but should I be investing?" They're saying interest rates are going to go up. We would need 5 or 6 interest rate rises in quick succession to take the wind out of this market. So for those people that are, again, following the herd, listening to mainstream media, it's all about clickbait journalism. So again, always happy to talk to any of your people offline about this and back it up with good data. But I just say tread cautiously and be careful who you seek counsel from.
Yeah. So on that, what do you think will happen over the next 12 months? Do you think we've peaked?
No, I don't. Certainly not in regional. One of the things, Pete, that's driving it, and in fact, we did a podcast on, will the exodus to affordable living reverse after COVID? And people are going, yeah, surely they're going to go back to the cities. Now, technology has changed the way we do business forever. The ability to work remotely, we've seen that employers are quite happy. People are meant to be safer if they're not going to an office as often. And so people have taken advantage of that opportunity. I mean, if you look at Bernard Salt, probably the most respected demographer in Australia, has been talking about this.
Spoke at our conference last Friday.
There you go.
Spoke at our conference on Friday.
Well, there you go. Brilliant. And I bet he would have spoken really well. But he's been talking about this exodus, Pete, for some 3 years. And the other thing, if you think about it, I think logically, people, I think, have taken a deep breath, gotten off the treadmill during COVID and reassessed their lives. I'm seeing that a lot of people no longer want to have negatively geared property. They don't want to have a mortgage on an investment property, buying at 6, 7, 800,000 and having to tip money in every month. So when you actually do and understand what's going on regionally, that there is a huge lack, a disparity of supply to versus buyers, and I've been calling it for some time, Peter, locust plague, of buyers swarming on regional cities, riding in with big wads of cash, and there's just not a lot of supply. I'm talking to agents, Pete, that are saying, for the first time in years, I've got no listings, or I've actually got no open for inspections this week, first time in 14 years. So we're pretty confident, Pete, that this market was probably got at least another 12 months to run in regional Australia, in certain markets, at least we're buying.
Again, and certainly our experience over the last couple of months has been very reflective of that. Stock is there 1 minute, gone the next, and it too is creating a drive in price as well. And regardless of the climb of property prices through COVID, where I'm living at the moment in my area is upwards of 40%, it will come back, but it's not going to come back 40%. It might come back 5%, 10%, maybe. It becomes the new norm, right? It resets. It's shown that all through history. We get the blood rush that it cools a bit, but it certainly doesn't go back down to what it was before.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think given the issue with available stock, I think it will keep the prices higher than even maybe what I make in my unprofessional scoping of property markets. I believe it would. So very interesting indeed. I'm going to answer a couple of other questions for the moment, Philip, just that I've got here, so that because it's going to run into some of our other questions. Hang on a sec. Shouldn't have had that peanut, but then it means I've got to have some more beer. How bad? Some more Guinness, not beer. You know what the biggest problem with Guinness is? When the can's empty. That's the biggest problem with Guinness. There's more in the fridge. Hey, the question I've got here is how to stay focused and manage stress. What's your thoughts on that? And this may start to lead us in some of the Saving Brothers conversations I'd like to have as well.
So the question was,
what's your thoughts on staying focused and managing stress?
And would you think that's just a general question in terms of how you conduct your life? Is that what we're thinking? Yeah, okay. I mean, for me, I've been I think sleep is a really, really, can I say, really important part. I think we as humans don't understand enough about sleep, and we underestimate how important sleep is. It's when the toxins are washed out of the brain at night. I myself in the past advocated, I can get away with 4.5 hours sleep, but it's not healthy. So I think getting a good night's sleep, turning off all the blue noise, which is your mobile phone, stop getting off the social media an hour or two earlier, turn off the TV earlier. Maybe you need to take magnesium as a relaxant. And in fact, these are things that we're doing at Saving Brothers. We're about to release a sleep book by a lady, Catherine Nixon, who's an expert in this area. I nicknamed her the Sleep Whisperer. Getting on control, Pete, of your gut health, microbiome test. A lot of people, and in broker land, I remember what it was like being a broker. You're almost a psychologist. You're dealing with your clients' stresses and emotions. And it's a bit like the big fella in The Green Mile, if you remember that film. You're taking on other people's stress. So I think it's really important to find ways to be able to relax. So I meditate. I've been doing transcendental meditation, or known as TM, since I was 24 and I'm 54. So 30 years I've been doing that. Morning, 20 minutes, first thing I do. And during the course of the afternoon, I do another session. I think it's important to exercise. And we'll talk about Keep 5 Alive today as well, Pete, because I think it's really important to get out in nature. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go to the gym and smash it out, but for some people, that is a great way of releasing stress. In my 30s, I was a runner and ran marathons as well. So I found that cathartic. I would say to anybody, get out into nature, get up a little bit earlier and go for a walk, smell the trees, listen to the birds. There is something, and people call it earthing. I think that's a really, and just also understand, just be kind to yourself. Self-care is number one on the Keep 5 Alive. Be kinder to yourself. Be your own best friend. In fact, we talked about it on the Saving Brothers podcast last night.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to more of that moment, but just on the sleep piece. So this ring is not decoration. See if I do. It's all full of sensors. It's called an Aura ring, right? And all those sensors are designed to monitor my sleep. And before it goes, it then registers on an app as to the quality of sleep I've had, and it also reads other things as well, your readiness. And you can see that night there, I had a bit of a broken sleep. I still slept well, but I was up for probably too often. But normally it's a lot better than that. And sometimes you have a real winner where you get 100% reading. But it helps to track that. It helps to track your calorie burn. But I never realized myself in the past how important it was to get a good night's sleep. As you said, the blue light at nighttime, knowing when to shut down your tech well before you start to go to bed. Eating habits that play into that. If you eat too late at night, it keeps your blood pumping, so your heart rate doesn't lower, so you don't get a decent night's sleep either. All that sort of stuff, I think, is really, really important for everyone to understand and to really start to think about, especially like me. I was going to say like you and me. Like me, as you get older, it becomes even more important that you watch these things, because it can become very, very hurtful to your health if you don't. We're going to talk about keeping five alive. I've got a question here come through from somebody who's watching, so I would like just to touch on that so I don't miss it. And it says here, hey, Philip, any advice for someone selling a house that has just been inundated with floodwaters? They've got parents that live in North New South Wales, and in 27 years have never had water in their home. A bit like I was saying before, that sometimes these things happen, and it's not a it's not a precedent, it's a history, it's a one-off. With this recent flood, though, floodwaters ended up about a millimetre from their upper level, which is their living area, which is miraculously spared. But they're in their later lives, and with little encouragement for myself, they recently made the decision to sell and relocate, maybe to far north Queensland. Will this be a massive roadblock? So I guess that's really in selling the home that's been inundated with flood waters for once in 27 years. I don't know how you go with selling houses versus in the purchase, but you got any thoughts on that? I think there's always going to be some nervousness when the place is just flooded, but hopefully it doesn't, the history becomes as important as what has just transpired, but I'm not really sure. But you got any thoughts?
I think you're spot on, Pete. I think you've got to look at the history. I think people would be nervous, and I don't want to sugarcoat it with an answer that. And again, you're right. I don't sell property. I only buy. But I think from an investor's perspective, they're probably not going to be the right sort of person. You've got to find someone that really wants to be in that town, and maybe there is somebody that lost their home completely, and perhaps a local person is the right sort of person to be able to. So if someone's pretty keen to want to stay on in that particular township because they absolutely just love being there, I would have thought that would be a good person to want to have a conversation with the local agents.
Yeah. Now, I'm only a minute or two away and I want to talk about keeping five alive, but I better answer a couple of questions because they won't take me long to get through. So one of the questions is, what's my sentiment around broker remuneration changes in the coming year? So the FBAA has just put a 161-page submission to government regulators back December, just before Christmas, in relation to the 2022 broker remuneration review. We have been very closely liaising with Labor since before the last election, and obviously that the last election there was conversations there that weren't beneficial to brokers' rem. But you need to understand the current government had the same position. So a lot of people look at the opposition and say, oh, you're going to get rid of commissions. Both of them were at the same page, right? They were both going to go for an all-up bundled model. So you had an upfront only, no trial. Both of them were going to do that, right? The only difference was that the current government, after a lot more intense conversations with ourselves in industry, changed and said we're not going to touch it. Now, as the future has evolved, both parties have turned around and said they're not going to touch broker rem. So at this stage, broker rem's all good. It's not a political football. Yes, we have the 2022 broker remuneration review by the Council of Financial Regulators and the ACCC. Oh, that's a mouthful. But I know at this stage, it's not even on the agenda for the ACCC and Council of Financial Regulators. So it's going to be the latter half of this year before it gets looked at. Our research that we conducted last year is a part of that 161-page document. It actually shows, not by any tweaking by us. I went looking for problems and found none. But customers don't care. They've got no problems with brokers being paid commission. They're all good with it. They say, and I think it's 98% of those surveys said that brokers act in their best interest. So to change broker rem, you've got to say, well, what is it you're trying to fix when there's actually nothing to change, right? There's nothing to fix. And I've had that discussions with all the regulators that are involved in that review, and then some with all the politicians, senators, ministers on both sides of the house in regards to that are relevant to this conversation. So everybody's across it. So I think we're pretty good, to be honest with you. So I wouldn't stress on that. Another question is here, will the FBAA ever provide a direct apply online facility so brokers don't need to pay for expensive aggregator software? At this stage, no. I think the aggregators would be a little bit unhappy with us if we did that, but it's not what we do as an association and industry body. So at this stage, no. Clawback status, that was a part of that 161-page submission we put together last year. We put that back on the front page to say, hey, this clawback structure is still wrong. Government will never get rid of it. There's a commerciality that sits in the background as to why it's appropriate it stays there. But 2 years is too long. 1 year should be the max. And we've put that back on the front page for further discussions with the regulators and ministers, and in particular looking at this remuneration review, the complications and impact of the best interest duty, and wrapped it all up together and say, bugger this. Personally, get rid of clawbacks, bugger it off. I'm actually completely against it, even at 1 year. The reality is you did your job, you get paid to do a job, and when you got paid as a broker, you only got paid half of what you were meant to get paid to do your job. The rest of it's on the drip, called a trail, right? So why should somebody have your hand in their pocket 1 or 2 years after you've done your job? It'd be different if you've got 100% and something went wrong, but you never got 100% of your money. So I'm actually very bitter about clawbacks, but I'm trying to make sure I play the right political game to get an outcome that is appropriate for everyone. And on that point of bid, there are no updates on bid as far as it is what it is. The extension of bid is dead. So taking the best interest duty into finance brokers, so the consumer asset folk, that's not happening at the moment. Same as responsible lending obligations repeal. That all got squashed because the Federal Treasurer couldn't get it through the House. So that's all dead, and wait and see what happens after the elections. And talking about elections, what's Pete's views on the upcoming election impacts on mortgage brokers and the industry as a whole? I said before, it doesn't. I'm not playing who you should vote for. That's a personal decision. That's up to you. But I think in this election, unlike the past, you have the ability and freedom to choose who you want to vote for without fear of your business being destroyed. That, to me, is the bottom line. So it's up to you which way you want to vote. Not my call. It's a personal decision. All right, that's gotten up to where is it? There's one other question I've got here, but I'll see if we come back to that a bit later. So, my friend, I want to talk about keeping Five alive and what you're doing with Saving Brothers. And Saving Brothers, although it says Saving Brothers, it's also about sisters as well. I have forever and a day talked about this industry as a family. I talk about mental health. As you know, I'm an advocate for mental health awareness in our industry. We know that out of the suicide rate in Australia, where 8 people commit suicide every day, the data is up that 7 of those 8 now are men who are committing suicide. It's actually increased from the past. So suicide rates in men are on the increase. The data says, and I am saying data says that men are more likely to take their lives and women are more likely to self-harm. That doesn't mean women won't take their lives, but we have to look after everyone. That is just a given. But talk to me more about what this thing is about keeping Five alive. Give me the good oil, my friend. Tell me all about it.
Sure, brother. Well, that came to me when I was out on a walk one morning. There you go, the benefit of being out in nature. So Keep Five Alive, Pete, is about getting men, if I can summarise it this way, as Dr. Rebecca McGowan, who's based in Albury, said to me, we want to help men reclaim the sovereignty over their health. Now, whilst you talk about sisters, absolutely, they can apply the same messages as well. But I came up with 3 things we wanted men to do. Number one, men are, I think my experience with men is we're not really good at looking out for ourselves. Now, that's not about being selfish, but self-care. So the first thing with Keep Five Alive, Pete, is that we want brothers, we want men across the globe to check in with themselves each day. How do you feel about yourself today out of 10? Self-awareness.
So, mate, just on that point, before you go further, you're talking men across the globe.
Yes.
This is a global initiative, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Saving
We've backed you.
SavingBrothers.com. We've got coaches and ambassadors from all across the globe involved with what we're building. So number 2 is exercise, movement. We know that 30 minutes 5 times per week of movement, can be walking, has been proven to replace 1 antidepressant tablet per day. There are endorphin release that's good for you to move. Now, one of the big ones with us men, and I'm going to say this in terms of the women who are listening as well, women are brilliant. They go and get pap smears and mammograms. They just do it like clockwork. Unfortunately, us men, we are in denial. So what we tend to do is we will go to a doctor, and I'm being generalised because some men are great at it, by the way, Pete, but across the globe, men tend to go to a doctor when their leg's about to fall off. They're not as proactive with their health. So it's really important, and I'm being simplified in the way I'm saying it. But again, and I know we talked about this, it would have been last year when you had your mental health initiative, and we talk about the engine. And I love this analogy. Back in the 80s, I was driving a beautiful Lancia, Italian car, coming up the Geelong Road, thinking I'm a bit of a rock star, working on the trading floor of the stock exchange, 19 years of age, and I hadn't been putting oil in the engine. So I've got the sunroof open, I'm driving along, and next minute, what I've done, I've seized the engine. So by not looking under the hood, which is your body inside, not looking inside, what if you've got a leaky, and I ended up having an oil leak, but I ended up having to replace the engine. So what we're talking about reclaiming your sovereignty over your health is getting into a doctor every year and getting your bloods done, because you need to form a baseline of a whole bunch of things. Prostate is one. Pete, you know my journey well enough. We've had these conversations before. At 47, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I always felt stress was a factor, but that's not proven. But because age 40 onwards, I started going and getting my bloods done, it formed a baseline. So a change in my PSA reading led to, hey, maybe we need to investigate. And even though my PSA score was not high, before I knew it, December 2014, I'm on an operating table having my prostate removed. It can be all sorts of things, because prostate, as in fact on Saving Brothers podcast last week, Pete, I interviewed a urologist, Dr. Darren Katz, and he said, there are no symptoms for prostate cancer. You need to get your PSA done. So the problem with us blokes is we put our heads in the sand, and we just kind of, it won't happen to me. But it does. One of my builders, Jerry, who I work with in Toowoomba, he's got 33 staples in his back. He'd be probably 62. He's now waiting to find out tomorrow, because he had a big lump taken out of his back. He's back at work on the tools, but he's waiting tomorrow to find out whether his tumour is benign or malignant. So stuff happens, brothers and women. Stuff happens. So let's get ahead of the curve. And because I said this on an interview on Channel 9, Pete, when I was interviewed about this whole stuff, and I said, what you would hate is to have this conversation when you go to your doctor and your doctor says, look, okay, what we want to do, we want to get you comfortable. We'll do everything we can to help. Yeah. That's an awful conversation for you, your family, your friends, and your own self. Imagine if you go, as it had happened for me and other men I know, whereby they said, great, we got it early. Might be a bit bumpy for the next few months, but the prognosis is good. Yep. So number 3,
that's good.
Is go to a doctor. Number 4 is gratitude. We often, as people, I think, spend so much time thinking about what's not right in our lives, what we don't have. Grass is greener on the other side. So gratitude's really important for us. Number 5, and you know where I'm going with this one, Pete, which is what the question I started out when you brought me out at the very beginning is, men are really good at masking. So you can ask a lot of guys, g'day mate, how you going? Yeah, good, not bad. And he could be absolutely in significant pain inside, but he wants to put the mask on to be okay, and socially it's all not vulnerable. So what we're teaching brothers across the globe is, hey brother, how's your day going out of 10? Now that's such a simple but beautiful question, because men are very good. Yeah. You ask them to give you a score, and when you ask them, Pete, to give you a score, and I can promise you I've had guys give me lots of good scores, but I've had men around the world, Pete, and for your listeners, give me a score of 1 or 3. Now, the beauty of that is I can then come back with, so brother, what's going on for you? The problem with us as men, Pete, we want to solve every old problems. Even when a wife or a partner comes home and shares her day, we're inevitably thinking, I need to fix this. No, They just want us to listen. So what we want to do is give brothers the opportunity, Pete, to put the load down. And that's just by let him be vulnerable. He just wants to share. I could talk about this for hours, but I'm conscious of brevity of time. So Keep Five Alive, program that we've got about helping brothers to do those 5 things.
So Philip, where do I find this program? Where is it?
Okay, so the concepts of it are out on our website or our platform, savingbrothers.com.
Which is savingbrothers.com. That's where you find out more. And look, what you're saying is, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, what we're changing, we're about to release a whole bunch of new tabs. Look at Shane Warne, look at Rod Marsh, look at that lady, the senator, and a number of people. It really hits home. It's like we're not good at taking action. So what we're going to be doing is having tabs on our website about cardiac health. What do you want to lose weight? A number of key things. As you know, Pete, we're bringing out a wellness app for men, and that's a virtual.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, and that's coming out probably within about 8 weeks, because again, if you think of it like almost having a PA, it's going to remind men, it'll be free, evergreen free, but it'll remind men of the things that they need to do based on their age. So the World Health Organization has markers on at what age, if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, 50s and 60s, what are the tests and checks you should be doing?
Yeah. And I'm not sure if this is a part of your vision. I'm going to take a part and say probably is, but in my mind, it immediately goes to sometimes we can only do so much for self. What we need to be doing is educating our children not to go down these journeys. Now, from my point of view, over the last, let's call it 18 months, I had 5 and nearly 6 different surgeries, mainly on my face. Now, I now have a permanent dent in my forehead. And also here, this scarring has never healed, so this is unbalanced. And I've had one go at trying to fix it, and I'm about to have another go at trying to get that balance right. But they cut right the way from there through here. They reformed my eye, scarred all the way down there and along here. So it came under my nose, and that's why my moustache is a little bit different. That was because I spent too much time in the sun as a kid, and this is all skin cancer related, and didn't look after myself. I tell you what, my stepson, who's now just turned 14, geez, I'm on him. So, mate, you don't want to go through what I've been through. It's not fun. And that's just one example. But we have to look after self first. But I think there's almost a self-realization in all that. When you go through something, you say, oh, shit, this is why this is so bad. I need to help others. And Keep Five Alive about helping to keep your brothers together on par, having the conversation, knowing that they've got a safe environment to talk about these things, but also in my mind, hopefully then that knowledge then gets imparted down the line through generations to make sure that they don't necessarily fall into the same challenges that you might. Doesn't mean you won't. I mean, we know that around 50% of people will have a mental health illness within their lifespan. It's something that the majority of us, I think that data is a bit old now, it's probably more than that, but we all know that we're going to get challenged at some point in time of our lives. So the whole conversation around mental wellness, mental health, mental illness, however you want to term it, depending on what you're saying at the time, the program you're running, brother, is just brilliant with Keeping Five Alive. And it's, hang on a second, new earpod decided it was going to go south on me, sorry about that.
All good.
Siri's trying to have a crack at me. Let me get rid of that. Oh, is that better? Can you hear me? Good. We're back online. But these things are so important, and it can never be stressed enough. So, my friend, to you from me, thank you so much for what you've done based on your personal experiences, but then taking that into something that is there to help men around the world and women. Very, very admirable, and such a great thing you're doing over and above the business that you run and being in our industry before. Buddy, thank you so much. We do need to wrap from there. We're running out of time. Yep. Thank you, my friend.